My name is S.L. Zeigler, and together with my wonderful collaborators, we will be talking about a ongoing project that we are very, very excited about, and that we have called in 25 of our closest friends, the Louisiana Digital Library, as community-focused data. As we'll discuss here, a lot has changed. We've heard this in every session so far. It turns out a pandemic will make one change their plans. I want to just very quickly thank Sharon and Nola and Zach and everybody who helped get us all together today. Again, I say I'm delighted to be here, and it's true, and by here I mean my house, of course, but I'm also very, very delighted to be virtually among all the friends, old friends and new friends, and I love Llama. Let me jump in. This is what we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk about the project, right? That's why we're here. I'll cover this part. I'm going to talk about the original idea, what we had hoped back in 2018, oh so long ago to actually do. And I'll talk about what the project looks like in a post-COVID, while COVID, current COVID world. And then I'll turn it over to my colleagues to talk about survey results from our very first activity, as well as our soon to be started, very exciting online speaker series. The project. We originally called it in 25 of our closest friends to convince the granting agency that it wasn't just about us. It was about all of the participants of the Louisiana Digital Library. Even before we were done writing the grant, we had 26 members. And then we had 27 right about the time we submitted it. So we now just say lots. We just have lots of closest friends. Plus, of course, there's a sort of even more than you might think, because we have some institutions who come in under other institutions. So now we have about 30 something. We say 30 plus participating institutions in the ODL. All of them are our closest friends. The project, broadly construed, is a collections as data project. And this is funded from a national project. We have cohorts all over the country. The money is coming from the Mellon Foundation, routed through the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. And the collections as data, in its most broad sense, is we're trying to think about digital cultural heritage content, so like letters and maps and photos, and how we can use those as computational analysis. So how we can do text analysis with them or digital mapping. So basically, we're trying to think about how we can use the contents of the ODL outside of the interface of the ODL, and what new affordances that gives us, what new types of interactions we can have with our users that way. So we are part of a cohort charged through this grant to come up with examples of how to operationalize the datafication of digital cultural heritage. And this is actually really important because we're thinking about how to operationalize it as opposed to coming up with a one-off project. As probably a lot of us know, a lot of fancy, shiny, new initiatives get started by very passionate people who then move or get burned out and stop doing it. And unless it's baked into the operation of an institution, that whole project tends to sort of fall apart. So what we're trying to do is think about how to change the structure of what we're doing to fit this new direction. About our project team. Leah Powell Duncan is one of our disciplinary scholars, and she's also here with us today. And as a disciplinary scholar, she is focusing on the teaching and researchers, the teachers and researchers, so the users of the ODL. Elizabeth Joan Kelly, also with us today, is the disciplinary scholar focusing on our other identified audience, which is the LDL practitioners, many of us here on this call. So by that, we're thinking about the content admins for the ODL, those of us who go to the trainings, those of us on the listserv. And from that angle, we're thinking about use and reuse of collections, how we evaluate how we're doing, how we evaluate who our users are. Gina Costello is our administrative lead. She is Associate Dean at LSU Libraries. And it's her job to ensure that the project remains relevant to and supported by the library. So again, we're trying to make this very operational, just very bake it into the institution. And I'm the project lead. I do a lot of these presentations, project management, logistics, outreach, promotion. Within that sort of broader, I don't have my chat open. I don't know if anyone has questions. Within the broader category that I just talked about, our specific project asks, like, what would it look like to offer the entire contents of the ODL as data? So instead of identifying one or two projects, like a newspaper project, for instance, or a collection of digitized letters, and figuring out how to export that data and use it for different things, we're trying to think, what would it look like if we had that capacity for the entire LDL? Every time something's uploaded, it can be used as data in a different application. And we know that this is sort of a big, complicated thing. Somehow they funded this. We're thinking that it's going to have two major tracks. The technology track, in which we have to really work out the bulk download of content, machine readable write statements. We'd build out APIs, of course, and really pay attention to proper restriction rules, because not everything should be used the same way. But even more so than the technology side, we spend an awful lot of time, almost all the time to date, thinking about the community side, right? So again, we're all in this together. So we have to ask questions like, is this something that all 30 plus LDL participants would want? Is this something that's appropriate for all collections within the LDL? And if not, how do we distinguish between collections for a project like this? And how can we as a group consider the ethical implications as well as the promise of collections of data all the way at the LDL level? So in 2019, when we were working on this totally seemed feasible. We were so happy with it. With the community deliverables, we're going to be an intro survey beginning of 2020, an introductory meeting in April in which we bring all content administrators together, explain what we're doing, talk about the survey results. We're going to do sample projects in May and June, which is going to be ways to show people, way to concretize what it is we're talking about. So we would work on a couple of small collections, show how they can be used as data, show how they can be removed from the LDL and used for educators. We're going to hold, and this is, y'all, this was the thing. We were going to hold an LDL Institute. We were going to, for the first time ever in LDL history, get everybody together in one room at the same time and really hash out what it is that we're doing as collaborators, how it is, answer the questions that we've never had a chance to ask before, such as, what are we digitizing? Why are we digitizing that? What write statements are we using for our stuff? Who do we actually want to use it? Or are we doing everything the way that we should be for the people that we want to use our stuff? And then we would do an outro survey in the spring of 2021 in which we found out how we were doing, and the technical deliverables would be in 2021 in the springtime after we had all the community deliverables. But y'all, COVID, my goodness. So we did the intro survey and the introductory meeting. The intro survey, we got a lot of great stuff. We'll be hearing about it soon. But we pushed everything back, revamped a lot of things. We're doing the sample projects, but that's been pushed back. We're currently doing it. We've got one online now. There's a link to it. Shout out to both Leah and Dre Tarleton, who I believe is on the call today, for helping with these. And we have an online speaker series, which again, we'll hear more about in this presentation, which I'm very excited about. We have the LDL Institute still on the books. It's for May 2021. If this were an in-person meeting, I would ask for a show of hands who thinks that would ever happen. But anyway, it's still there. We're hoping it could happen. We don't know what May will look like. Outro survey will be pushed back to May, and then the technical deliverables maybe all the way to the next summer. Okay, so that's the broad overview. I can pause here if there are any questions. But what I do want to say is that this is a very exciting project. We have a lot of great stuff coming up. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Elizabeth, now to talk about the survey results, because one of the very first things we did was ask participants of the ODL to answer some questions, just to get us started, to get a snapshot of how it is we operate now.
Okay, thank you. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the results of this survey that we sent out to kick off this project. We administered the survey through Qualtrics, and we sent individualized invitations to participate to the primary content administrator at 27 LDL member institutions. We had a really good response rate. We had 74% actually fill out the survey, and we asked questions in 4 categories: about your institution, digitization selection, content and scope assessment, and usage and assessment. Parts of the survey that were related to usage and assessment we took from a similar survey that was administered by the IMLS-funded Developing a Framework for Measuring Reuse of Digital Library Objects grant in 2018. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's dig into the results. First of all, LDL institutions, as you probably all know, have minimal staffing dedicated to digital initiatives, usually one or two people. But despite that fact, 90% of them still have active digitization programs. Next slide. At most institutions, individual staff decide what gets digitized. Many others determine digitization based on patron requests, or they don't have a formal policy for making these decisions. Interestingly, while 65% of respondents generally thought that their current solution worked well for their institutions, 61% were still interested in developing or modifying their digitization selection strategy. Next slide. 58% of respondents assessed the content and scope of their collections. By far, most did so via metadata assessment. Others mentioned user surveys, assessing patron use, relevance to mission and collection scope, physical condition, and rarity as methodologies that they employed. Next slide. Those who don't assess content and scope cited lack of training as the primary reason, although lack of personnel and documented best practices were also frequently selected. Next slide. By far, most respondents said that their institution's collection development policies are very or somewhat influential on digitization decisions, though 11% of respondents did not have a collection development policy. Next slide. 65% of our respondents collect use or access statistics, primarily through Google Analytics, which is what the LDL provides, but also view counts on other platforms and user-supplied information like reference consultations. The main reason some institutions did not collect statistics was a lack of personnel. Next slide. Only 29% collect reuse data, or how often and in what ways digital library materials are repurposed via methods such as logging requests for high-resolution images. The data collected for those who are assessing reuse includes things like citations, published or reposted digital objects, and social media shares. Lack of documented best practices was the biggest barrier, although training needs and lack of personnel were also frequently mentioned. Next slide. So we asked how familiar respondents were with the term collections as data, and less than half were familiar. And of those who were familiar, less than half of those are actively working to make their collections accessible as data. For those who are, they're doing so via metadata export, bulk downloads, and reuse of multimedia data. Next slide. So some of our major takeaways from the survey are as follows. While participating institutions' engagement with digitization varies widely, over half of respondents expressed an interest in developing or modifying their current digitization selection strategy. So this is going to move forward as a major focus for us during the grant. Next slide. In line with existing use and reuse research, practitioners were much more likely to assess use than to assess reuse of their digital library objects. While barriers to use assessment include lack of staffing, which we can't directly assist with through this grant, reuse assessment might increase with established best practices, which is something that we could work towards in this project. Respondents also do not have data about who is using their digital collections, and knowing their users and their users' needs could help them inform digitization priorities. So something as simple as a point of view survey on the LDL website could help clarify this, and that's something we could potentially do as well. Next slide. For one of our biggest takeaways is that ongoing dialogue around digitization selection is desired by LDL members, and a one-size-fits-all decision or workflow is not going to work for this diverse set of institutions. So we are committed to ensuring that discussions about this topic over the next few years take into account the varying needs and priorities of this community. Next slide. We'll be using the results of the survey to continue to inform the grant and the ongoing work of community building among LDL libraries. We are also hoping to publish the results in an article, which could then serve as a basis for comparison among other consortial digital libraries and their digitization selection practices. So now I'm going to turn it over to Leah, and she's going to talk about the next phase of this project, which is our online speaker series.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Leah. So the major outward-facing part of this project that's about to officially kick off in just a few weeks is our online speaker series. Go to the next slide. This speaker series was designed as an alternative to our original plan, which was, like SL said, to host the LDL Institute, where we'd all be in the same room, engaging around topics such as use and reuse, how to engage with various communities in Louisiana, discussing criteria for digitization selection. We'll still be engaging with those ideas by shifting to the online speaker series. This series will provide us an opportunity to hear from experts around these specific topics, to dialogue with them, and then also with each other around these ideas. These talks are being designed with LDL participants in mind specifically as the primary audience, but they will be open to a wider audience as well. Also, the talks will be recorded and available on the LDL site, so they will be a lasting resource for our community. And we are very excited that we're working on the likely possibility of compiling edited versions of these speaker series talks as papers for publication. We want to publish them in a local journal to keep our core Louisiana audience centered. And while there are still plenty of details yet to decide, we're excited to say that Codex is willing to work with us on a special edition. The speakers we've spoken to so far seem excited about this publication opportunity. And the special edition journal will also make this series accessible in another form as a more widely available resource. Slide. We've planned this series around a set of topics that we would have discussed at the Institute, but that we've recruited speakers to explore with us. So the topics we're focusing on are digital collections and community involvement, selection for digitization, computational use of large collections, use and reuse, and empathetic use of digital collections, though there's still some flexibility in those topics and the way these talks will end up going. Slide. These are the rock stars we've already booked for our speaker series. We've met with all of these participants to explain our project and to talk about the LDL. They all plan to tailor their talks to be directly relevant to our community. So first to speak will be Alex Torres on October 6th, and she's going to share some resources and lesson plans that use the LDL to engage middle and high school students. I'll go ahead and read some of this because these are really exciting. We're going to have Dorothy Berry. She's the Digital Collections Program Manager at Harvard. We'll have Tanya Sutherland, who's a professor in the Department of Information and Computer Sciences at the University of Hawaii. We've got Jessica Perkins-Smith, archivist at Mississippi State. Jacqueline Wernemont, Chair of Digital Humanities and Social Engagement at Dartmouth. Brian Carpenter, Curator of Native American Materials at the American Philosophical Society. And Sharon Leone, who's a professor of history and digital humanities at Michigan State. I know that on our team, we've been hugely influenced by some of these professionals and are just beyond excited to hear from them and to hear them specifically apply their ideas to our specific context and then use that shared knowledge and shared vocabulary as a diving board for a deeper dialogue within our local community. Slide. Okay, so that's what we've been working on with this grant project in 25 of our closest friends. The LDL is community-focused data. I know that I was especially excited to share some of this with y'all as members of our local community. And we could probably put some of those links in the chat if you want to read more about this project. Do any of my team members have final words before we move on to any questions? I see some excitement about our participants, and I am also excited.
I know both of them, they're amazing. Dorothy is phenomenal. This is gonna be awesome, guys.
Yeah, I've been telling the speakers that it reads like a who's who of my intellectual heroes in the field, and I'm just absolutely thrilled about this. I'm going to go ahead and stop my sharing of the screen now so we can see each other with some ease. Let's see.
I think there was only one question that I saw, which was asked, Scott, when you were speaking. So if you want to address, Marilyn asks if Zoom meeting is an alternative that would work for you and your project.
For the institute, yes, absolutely, it is, and that's very likely a situation we'll end up in. It's just this conference is amazing. Doesn't reflect on that, but to say that Zoom meetings can be, it's just harder to have the same. We were just disappointed, right? So like everybody else. But yes, Zoom meeting to get us all together, and that's what the first meeting was that was on the agenda that we did in the spring, and that's what the last meeting was planned to be already. So we were already thinking about that. But yes,
I'm not offended, by the way.
you shouldn't be offended. This is fantastic. Nothing to be offended about.
Thank you. But you're right. In person is always better. So I'm just like, I'm not even going to debate that. I am glad that, again, we've made it through 4 sessions so far. Thank everyone for sticking with us. Rah, rah. Does anyone have any other questions for our presenters? It was an excellent presentation. We're just gonna, it's like we're at lunchtime now, so we're kind of like hitting the wall of no. Okay, all right. I can cut us off a little bit early if we do want to take off and have an extra 5 minutes for lunch. But if anyone has any questions, please speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, I'll just say, again, thank you to everybody who made this possible, everybody who stuck it out all the way to lunchtime. And please do reach out if you have questions about this. A lot of the links, relevant links, are in the chat. But if you didn't quite catch that, we can send you this presentation. We can do whatever is necessary to make sure everybody stays up to speed. We've got the preliminary schedule out of the speaker series, and we just got another message. We're adding titles and descriptions as they come in. We hope to have that up pretty fast.
I just want to say real quick before everybody goes, I've been a fan of the Louisiana Digital Library since I came to Louisiana and learned about it. And I've always enjoyed the work they've done, but I love how you all who are leading it now, Dina, SL, Leah, Elizabeth, everybody who's working with the LEO, I love the direction you're taking this. You're making us more relevant, more amazing, better archivists, and the challenges that you've presented to me, because yeah, the last session I had to dip out of because it was just over my head. But I'm going to get there, and I love that, and I love what you all are doing, and I just want to thank you all so much for your hard work and your great work.
Thank you. Well, that's a great place to end before anybody corrects it.
Okay, we don't seem to have any other questions in the chat, so I will, we can end the meeting a little bit early. Everyone, whoever wants to be back for the lightning round session at 1 p.m., we will see you there, and if not, then hopefully we'll see you at the business meeting and or the happy hour at 3:30, but otherwise, thank you for coming, and go get some food.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.